All right. Good morning or afternoon, whenever you're watching this. I guess I'm recording it in the evening, so there we go. We got all time zones or time options covered there. So this here is a drawing of a kitsui that I really, prior to doing this one, asked the readers what other voting pages they had liked, and they were kind of to take the time and give me their top 3 voting pages that they enjoyed. So I tried to look at those pictures, get some ideas of what they enjoyed in them and what their similarities were, and then fold that all into one drawing. And so this is kind of going to be the result of that small little survey that I did. So thank you if you responded to that. Your input helped influence this drawing. In addition to that, this drawing, which we'll see much later in the video, I tried to work in kind of a transparency, turning visible after being invisible type of thing going on. We'll see that in like the tip of the tail, the ends of the shins going towards the feet, and the tip of the hair coming out. So that will become much more apparent later on, and when we actually have a drawing to see stuff through. So kind of, I guess, what I thought I'd like to talk about this week is going a little bit more, or I mean this month, it's going a little bit more off the cuff. Talk about some other stuff. Now, while this one is called a Kitsui Cyberpunk, it's actually far more inspired by Ghost in the Shell as a drawing. So, but I felt that was maybe a little too IP cling-worthy to call that, so I just went with a more the general term of cyberpunk that Ghost in the Shell had a huge role in influencing its creation in of that genre. So kind of starting from there, I think I'll talk a little bit about the Cyberpunk game and my experience playing through that. So that was my first CD Projekt Red game. I didn't play The Witchers before that. So I tried playing that. So this was my first game of theirs to play. And it was quite a experience. So I basically played the whole game on a Xbox One X. The first year model came out, so a really old, about as old as you can get with the Xbox One X version, on a basically what amounts to a computer monitor sized TV, quote unquote. It has a really small screen, and so I just had that set up on kind of my nightstand next to my bed, and so the whole set was probably within like a 5-foot radius of me, and that's how I played the game that very first buggy night, which took a really long time to download. Something went wrong, and it didn't do the pre-download, so I had to wait for it to download all on its own, which ended up working out fine, because I remember J.S. Stryker at the time recommended the Whiteboard comic, so I sat up back. It was raining that evening, so I just sat under the porch and read that while I waited for it to download, and it ended up being just a really nice, relaxing evening doing that. And then so the game finally got downloaded, and I was able to go and play it, and it is very much a game, especially with all its, I guess you could say, kind of trippy reds and blues, cyber feel with the color palette and stuff for all the digital things. That leaves you very confused at the start, and it just felt like it's really hard to keep track of what was going on and such. And so it took quite a while to get used to the game. And I ended up doing my first playthrough on that whole little setup with all the bugs, because if somehow you don't know, that game was incredibly buggy when it came out. And I could attest to that. Probably my favorite bug I encountered in the game was doing one of the Johnny Silverhand missions, where you need to escape the police in his Porsche. And I go to get into the Porsche, And as the entering animation is playing, I don't know if I get shot or something, but I get knocked down. And so the script for the car kicks in. So the car drives off. The police go chasing the car. And I stand up. I'm just standing in this empty parking lot. Like, where'd everybody go? What do I do now? Do I run on foot this whole thing? Is this what's supposed to happen? And I said, no, this is a bug. So I reload and properly get in the car this time and do the whole Porsche car chase and thing. So it was, but it still ranks as one of my favorite bugs I encountered in playing a game, just because it broke in the way where it wasn't immediately apparent it was broken. So that was kind of a fun thing. And one of the things, I guess, that having played through that game that I enjoyed was not every choice you make has to have a consequence, which sounds weird, but sometimes there are just bad people that you can get rid of, and guess what? The world doesn't end. So that's just kind of a interesting little experience there, where you're not rewarded for it and you're not punished for it either. It's just, that's interesting. I definitely do think that their overhaul that they did with Phantom Liberty greatly improved the talent system, and I think that a lot of aspects in the game did come in very undercooked. Like, I remember at launch, I don't know if this was actually the case, but I remember there was only two types of legs. Ones where you could hold charge to jump really high, or one that gave you a double jump. And I think they added this later, but legs that let you sprint faster. But I felt like that was a mistake. Not that they should have had more than 3 options. Like, maybe you should have hover boots. Maybe you should have legs that. I was going to say improve how fast you can move while sneaking, but that would also undo a lot of the skill points in the sneak tree. So maybe that's not something you should add, but or maybe you should. Maybe it's like, well, you can skill point into this, or you can get cybernetics to perform that and use your skill points elsewhere at the expense of that cybernetic slot. So I don't know, maybe there's something to be said for that. That you should have some cybernetic modifications that do compete with skill slots for character customization. So, you kind of pick and choose what you want to give up in how you build your stuff. But yeah, I guess that's an idea there. I'd say another idea I had is for the arms. I felt like that you basically had you had the blade arms, a gorilla arms, and your wire arm, and your wrist rocket arm, which that was the one I rocked because, hey, it's a wrist launcher. You gotta watch out for those. I felt like that this was also, though, a little underdelivered, and that you should have had you could have had like a finger gun arm, where you'd shoot out your fingers, kind of like a goof if anyone's that familiar with the old Gundam mobile suit stuff. You could even, I guess, be silly and do like a finger gun, so point your fingers and you shoot stuff with. A flamethrower arm, I think, would have been another good one, which it looked like they teased in their Phantom Liberty trailer, but it's not something you could get. But I think that would have been a fun option as well. Certainly the game needed dual wielding, I would say. I think it really hurt not having that, because it limited in some respects what you could have done with some build things as well. Like in the Edge Runner anime with Rebecca, how after the time skip she gets big red and blue hands and is dual wielding shotguns and light machine guns and such at that point. And I think, and I thought, that should be something that should be in the game, where you could get basically mega hands, which lets you dual wield rifle weapons. But at expense, you can no longer wield SMGs or pistols, so small hand weapons. I think that would have been a interesting and fun trade-off. So I am interested to see what the follow-up's going to do, if they're really going to dive more into really get into modify yourself and your character with your character and that whole aspect. So it is something that I hope they do. I personally enjoy iterative game design. Kind of like with the Monster Hunter and the Demon Souls games, or the Soulsborne games, I guess call it that, where those companies have, instead of trying to do everything all at once, they take a certain amount of challenge that they want to accomplish with that title and make that their focus, and then improve upon it, or either refine or cut certain aspects of it as they go on to the next entry and then the next, and so on and so forth. And I think that that's a really good way of doing your game design, because it just kind of manages what you have to develop, and allow you to keep steadily rolling out a product. And so that's how you end up with like your Monster Hunter Wilds and your Elden Rings. Is you don't start there, you work your way up there through multiple iterations. And so that's something that I hope CD Projekt Red is going to do with Cyberpunk, is take a more iterative approach with it. I also hope it's not going to be 6 years in between games, because that's a long time to wait. That was not a... I was going to say that was not a fun wait, but that was kind of very much the game went into, is this vaporware or not type mindset. So that's just kind of been most of my experience of Cyberpunk. The other end of it, where I guess I was really exposed to it, aside from Billy Idol's Shock to the System, would be the Ghost in the Shell stuff. Now, kind of my history is, I've never seen the animated film that made it real big, nor have I seen the Scarlett Johansson live action remake. Just somehow, I never seen those, and it's not real high on my watch list. I don't know why. So, the first thing I really watched was the Standalone Complex anime, with the Laughing Man case, and the other case I can't remember now what it is, but I certainly remember the Laughing Man one. That was a good one. And then I also like within this past year went and read the manga of it, which I enjoyed a lot, and I think it's interesting. Between the anime and the manga, I kind of like the manga a bit better, even though it's not always as serious, and I think that was something that I guess you'll call it the mainstream version of it, the anime and stuff like that, kind of lost, is how much more seriously it took itself. I think it's kind of led to a bit of a loss. Because what I'd say their weakness across all the things I've seen, both the television show and the manga, is when it gets real deep into the philosophy of stuff, of what really makes us human and things, which I don't think is a bad concept to get into and explore. I think the problem is that it gets so deep into that idea, it kind of loses focus on the turnaround. So an aspect that I judge on how smart something is, basically, is the notion of true intelligence is to take something complex and then simplify it so you could explain it to a 5-year-old. And I think that's something that the Ghost in the Shell IP has struggled to do, where it doesn't do that simplify conversion. Not to necessarily say that I think it has to be stupid, but it's mainly how you interrogate an idea of, do I understand this enough that I can simplify it? The closest I would say that both the manga and the anime got really involved to that point was with the Tachiyamas, I think there are, the little blue spider robots. Aside from them being a fun comedic relief in a lot of cases, and just really enjoyable to watch, I think they were really onto something with the various ideas of them, as a kind of borderline developing independent thought and such. And I think that would be a very interesting way to take the story, because if the question is the Major being so much a robot with everything except a brain, how is she still really a person? The opposite end of that would be to take a robot that was always a robot, always an AI, but views itself as, I guess you could say, as a person. And the Takeyamas do a very good job with that concept because they look nothing like a person, but they display some of the most human-like interactions, particularly children-like interactions with each other and the other members of the Force. Like even Bato's got his favorite pet one that he enjoys and gives special treats to. And I think that is a very strong, compelling aspect of I said one of the more compelling aspects of the show is you take the complex idea and then you go to simplify it, to interrogate it, looking at it on the other end. And well, that element was obviously in the show in the show and in the manga because I referenced it. I don't think it was traded to a strong capacity as it could be. Now, part of the problem I think going on with this is truthfully, you got a few movies, 2 seasons of the anime, and like 2 books that the original author did, and then I think someone else has done a whole bunch of the other books, and I haven't read those yet. Maybe I should get around to reading those and see if how they hold up. But essentially, kind of what this means is there's enough meat on the bone that you need just more time to explore it than what they've... Idea-wise, I should say there's enough meat on the idea that they need more time to explore it than what has actually been dedicated to it in all the source material in every regard. Now, I do know that they got a new anime coming up here, I think like this year or next year, and it's looking like it might hold closer to the manga, so I'm certainly interested in seeing how that is going to turn out. I mean, hopefully it'll be good. I'm thinking of... I was thinking of doing a drawing at some point closer to when it's going to release, and more in line with the Ghost in the Shell stuff, but I'm terrible at drawing machines. It's just not a skill set I have. I think the problem is I don't understand enough of the inner workings of a machine to get it to work right. Like this gun here, you probably saw I opened up a whole new document to try and draw and design this gun and even fiddle around with the layouts of the bullets and such and how they would feed from the magazine into the chamber and out the barrel to make that work. And even then I still screwed up because I made a bullpup that pushes the rounds forward up into the firing chamber, which sits above the pistol grip, which completely negates the whole purpose of a bullpup, which is to have a longer barrel length, or basically maximize the barrel length, so you get more projectile speed as it comes out, because the longer it sits in the barrel, the more time it's being pushed by the burning propellant and allowing it to pick up speed. I mean, theoretically, you could hit the point where it can't go any faster because it can only expand so quickly, but I don't think I've ever heard of a gun that has a long enough barrel that becomes an issue. But anyhow, so basically, yeah, point being, in even trying to figure out how a gun works, I made a bullpup that's completely useless. And I even got like if you look kind of, or if you've seen kind of on the butt of the stock there, kind of a little handle thing that looks like a second charging handle. That's not really a second charging handle. That's kind of like a pin that you could grab and ram rounds forward to push them out into kind of the chamber. So like if you need to empty the gun, you got a few rounds in the magazine there and then fed up into that tube that goes up to the firing chamber. Well, if you need to completely empty it out bullets, you basically take the magazine out, open up the chamber, pop the round out in there, and then use that pin to push rounds up into the chamber where they could be popped out. So you could completely empty your gun at that point. So again, it's like, yeah, I figured something out there, but it's completely at the expense of being completely stupid. So which is, the real travesty of that is my dad and my brothers are both engineers. 2 of them have worked with guns and are quite experienced with it, and I am just... I'm certainly I wouldn't say I'm the black sheep of the family, but I missed out on the gene that makes me mechanically minded. Like, I'm not too good at cores either. So yeah, it's just an interesting thing that's just, my mind just does not work like that. But I suppose we all have different strengths and such, and that is why we're able to do different things. I suppose, like, just an interesting example of that. My dad and my brother were designing a cannon, I guess you could say, with some medical gauze to fire cupcakes and such. Maybe I told this story, but I can't remember if I told this story or not. I apologize if I already told this story. But they were having troubles of getting the release mechanism not to catch, and so it would release smoothly. So I had an idea, well, let's use the forks on a hammer, so that way you could just kind of rotate it, and as it rotates, it will release smoothly. And they ended up improving on that idea, rightfully so, but the same basic concept applied. So I suppose that's my greatest engineering achievement. But anyhow, so let me know what you think of this format. Do you want more personal stories? Do you want my thoughts on different media or game experiences? And if you have any other ideas or suggestions of drawings you'd like to see, let me know. And I'll see what I could do and put together. So thanks for joining me. I hope there is some stuff of interest in this whole little ramble, and I hope you have a good day. So take care, and yeah, stay cool, I guess. Whatever a sign off is. All right, goodbye. Take care.